It's 2025 and a new year means brand new opportunities. And for a lot of you out there, I know you've been thinking about one thing over the holidays, and that is starting your own business. But you have so many questions like, how do I get started? How do I come up with a brand? How do I even sell stuff to people? And what am I even going to sell? Now take a deep breath. Shopify has got you. Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. And you can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. You don't have to be a coding nerd or a design geek to get this done. All you need to do is drag and drop. Shopify also helps with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard, so you can focus on the important stuff, like growing your business. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/truecrime, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/truecrime to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/truecrime.
Bombas makes the most comfortable socks, underwear, and T-shirts.
Warning, Bombas are so absurdly comfortable you may throw out all your other clothes.
Sorry, do we legally have to say that?
No, this is just how I talk, and I really love my Bombas.
They do feel that good. And they do good, too. One item purchased equals one item donated.
To feel good and do good, go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
This is a story that begins with a dying wish.
One thing I would like you to do.
My mother's last request that my sister and I finish writing the memoir she'd started about her German childhood, when her father designed a secret super weapon for Adolf Hitler. My grandfather, Robert Lusser, headed the Nazi project to build the world's first cruise missile, which terrorized millions and left a legacy that dogged my mother like a curse.
She had some secrets. Mom had some secrets.
I'm Suzanne Rico. Join my sister and me as we search for the truth behind our grandfather's work and for the first time, face the ghosts of our past.
Jeez. Who is he?
Listen to The Man Who Calculated Death. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 411 of the True Crime All the Time Unsolved podcast. I'm Mike Ferguson, and with me, as always, is my partner in true crime, Mike Gibson. Gibby, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing okay. How about you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
You didn't ask me how I was doing on TCAT, by the way.
Well, subconsciously.
You did?
I did, and you answered.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You might want to get yourself checked out, but...
we've been saying that for years.
Let's go ahead and give our Patreon shout-outs. We had Kelly Reichert.
Hey, Kelly.
Mallory Foster.
There's Mallory.
Amanda Collins.
Well, that's awesome. Thanks, Amanda.
Janice Regine.
Regine.
Kelsey Turner.
Hey, Kelsey.
Josh Peters.
What's up, Josh?
Rachel Black.
Hey, Rachel.
MJ Himmelstein.
Good old MJ, man.
Yeah, jumped out higher than our highest level.
Love it.
Nilly Isadis.
Nilly Manilly.
Okay. And last but not least, Alicia DeLisa.
DeLisa.
Yeah.
Clearly, she does not like Lisas.
Maybe not. And if we go back into the vault, this week we selected Sarah Prosser.
Hey, thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, appreciate the new support, the continued support. We have a brand new episode out right now on True Crime All the Time, where we're talking about the murder of Julia Martha Thomas. It's a very infamous 19th century crime in Britain. It's also known as the Barnes Mystery or the Richmond Murder. Julia was murdered by her servant, Kate Webster, who dismembered her remains and then impersonated her for weeks before fleeing the country.
So very interesting.
It is. It is. And like you said during the episode, the motives behind it, kind of how it played out, it's not that much different from what you would find in a very recent case.
Yeah, there's no difference between back then and today with what went down in this case.
No, the difference is, how hard it was for them to solve it, right? The technology that they had, those are the differences. All right, buddy, are you ready to get into this episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved?
I am.
We're talking about Branson Perry. Branson Perry went missing after leaving his house in April 2001, over 20 years later. Authorities believe he was murdered, but his body has never been found. Investigators feel confident his disappearance was somehow drug-related and that people in the small town of Skidmore, Missouri, are hiding information that could lead to the recovery of his remains. Branson Perry was born on February 24th, 1981. He was 20 years old. At the time of his disappearance, Branson graduated high school in 1999. He worked for a roofing company and for a traveling petting zoo, but he was unemployed at the time of his disappearance.
Traveling petting zoo. That sounds like fun.
Yeah, get to hang out with the animals, care for the animals.
Yeah. I know you like that name Branson too.
I do. I talked about it on Patreon. It's such a different first name.
You don't hear it very often.
No, not at all. In his free time, Branson enjoyed spending time outdoors and weightlifting. He also had a black belt in Hapkido, a Korean martial art.
Kind of a difficult thing to get a black belt in, but, it's achievable.
I know you have a number of black belts. Most of them you bought at JCPenney, but some of them are tied to martial arts, I think.
Yeah, I do have the one from the Sistema martial arts, which was very difficult to get, but along with my Russian mentor, I achieved it.
Okay, not familiar with that one, but I'm glad you got that taken care of. In 2001, Branson was living with his father, Bob Perry, in Skidmore, Missouri. His parents divorced in November 2000, and his mother, Becky Kleino, was living in a small town 20 miles away. Skidmore is known for several high-profile murders and disappearances. Skidmore resident Ken McElroy was murdered in 1981. McElroy was hated by locals. Multiple people witnessed the shooting, but no one identified the killer, and his murder remains a well-known unsolved case.
One of the cases we did years ago, and I remember it pretty good.
Yeah, it was one of your favorites, I think.
It was.
The particulars of the case were so interesting, and the fact that, it happened in full sight of many, many people, but yet, because they didn't like this guy, no one was willing to come forward and say who was involved, who was the shooter or shooters.
It just tells you how much he was disliked.
Yeah, it was almost like, they were perfectly fine with him being killed. But if you haven't listened to that one, go back, check it out. It's a good case. And just 1 year before Branson disappeared, a Skidmore man stomped his girlfriend to death. Now, you're going to have murders in almost every town, right? Some towns have many more than others. In a small town, people are probably less apt to experience murders, especially high-profile murders.
Yeah. So they're going to really stand out.
Yeah, but they do happen. Branson Perry went missing on April 11, 2001. Branson's father was in the hospital on this day and was expected to come home on April 13th. Branson wanted to clean up the house to prepare for his return and asked his friend Jenna Crawford to come over and help him. At the same time, two men were at the house working on his father's car. The alternator had broken down the day before. And man, that alternator is a real pain in the you-know-what.
It is, man. It's a hard thing to replace by yourself.
Oh, I was never going to attempt that. I was alluding more to the fact that you're pretty much SOL once that thing goes out.
Kind of need it.
It's kind of very necessary. Most accounts of what happened on the day of Branson's disappearance are credited to Gina Crawford, but they come secondhand from individuals who spoke to her. Gina declined to talk to the Maryville Forum, which compiled information from multiple news sources and interviews to create one detailed article on the case. Gina said she didn't want to talk in case she has to give court testimony in the future.
That's kind of smart on her part.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Here's a young woman who's really kind of thinking ahead. What happens if and when they find Branson? Let's say they determine for sure it was a murder. They have a suspect. She doesn't want to give anything away. It's kind of a tactic you often see from police, right?
Yeah.
Around 3 p.m., Branson told Jenna he was going outside to put jumper cables in the nearby shed. She thought he would come back right away, but he didn't. Becky Kleino wrote on her website, "Bring Branson home." The events of the day are fairly sketchy to me and often make no sense. The post continued, at one point, Crawford saw Branson run into the kitchen and take something out of one of the cabinets, then run out the back door. When he returned, she said he wouldn't tell her what he was doing and acted like nothing happened. Later, she said she had taken a shower, and when she came out of the bathroom, she saw one of the men who were working on the car going through the cabinets in the kitchen. She said she asked him what he was looking for, and he told her nothing and went back outside. Then at approximately 3 p.m., she had been upstairs when she heard the front porch door shut. She looked out the window and saw Branson. She asked him where he was going, and he told her he was going to put the jumper cables in the storage shed and would be right back. She never saw him again. Okay, there's a couple of things here kind of jumped out at me. Right, first and foremost, this guy working on the car, just kind of coming into the house and, rummaging through cabinets. We don't have a lot of sense of the relationship with these guys. Maybe they thought it was okay for, them to come inside, or I don't know. Maybe there was something a little more to it.
It makes you wonder what's going on inside those cabinets.
Yeah. I mean, you could make the argument that the guy was looking for a glass. He wanted some water, but we don't know.
But if it was just that, you think he would say,
yeah, I was just wanting some water. According to Becky, Jenna assumed Branson got sidetracked and she left the house after she finished what she was doing. On Friday, April 13th, Branson's father, Bob, was not ready to be discharged from the hospital. Branson's grandmother, Joanne Stinnett, went to the house to check on him. She found all the doors open and the radio on, but Branson wasn't home. And there really are no accounts explaining why Jenna Crawford or the two men left the house in this state, or if it was in this state when they left. Joanne Stinnett returned to the house on Saturday the 14th, and Branson still wasn't home. She called some of Branson's friends, but no one had heard from him. It was uncharacteristic for Branson to go long periods without contacting anyone, and his grandmother was becoming worried.
Well, if you haven't seen your grandson in a few days, you're probably going to be concerned.
Yeah, I get that concern, but when you start calling friends and find out that no one has heard from him, I mean, what young guy or girl, for that matter, doesn't reach out to their friends for days on end?
Yeah.
Not many. Today, it's more social media and direct messaging and things like that. But, back when we were younger, it was telephone calls or meeting up someplace or whatever.
But you tie that into the fact that the house kind of looked disarray.
Yeah, it was in disarray. I think, the real kind of mystery on that for me was that if Jenna left, as she said she did, Branson wasn't home. So either she left the house in kind of a strange way, right? The doors open, the radio on, or Branson did return later on and something happened that caused the house to be left in that state. Joanne called Bob on Sunday the 15th, and Bob called Becky to tell her what was happening. Bob was discharged from the hospital on April 16th. He met Becky and Joanne at the Nottoway County Sheriff's Office to report Branson missing. Branson left his vehicle and all of his personal belongings behind, including his wallet.
Which is strange.
It always is to me, as we go through an unsolved episode where someone seemingly disappears. When you start to think about, was it a voluntary disappearance or an involuntary disappearance? The idea that someone would just up and leave on their own, but leave all of their personal belongings behind just rings so strange to me. First of all, you have to figure out why the person would want to leave their life, for the lack of a better term. And if they did want to leave their life, is there not some things that they might want to take with them?
Yeah.
To help them out?
Why make it so difficult to restart your life?
Right. And again, most of the time, I believe it's because this person wasn't planning on leaving. They didn't just up and leave voluntarily. Something happened to them.
It's like foul play.
Yeah, something along those lines. That's what I tend to think. That doesn't mean it's always has to be that. The police checked the shed on the property and didn't find the jumper cables Branson mentioned. However, 2 weeks later, an unspecified individual found them just inside the door. And that's always a strange thing, right? Now, could it be that police didn't look all that hard? It could be.
Yeah.
Or it could also be that, the story was out there that he said he was taking these jumper cables to the shed, and somebody came back later after the police had searched it and said, you know what? I'm going to put these jumper cables in the shed.
Like he did it.
And when it says just inside the door, I mean, what goes through your mind? Pretty tough for the police if they're checking the shed not to see him, right?
Yeah, it makes it sound like they were at it later.
The first investigator assigned to the case was Steve Whittington. According to Whittington, the police didn't suspect foul play initially. They monitored Branson's bank account, but it was never touched. And, we hear that in a lot of cases where people disappear. So now you have, Branson not taking his vehicle, not taking personal belongings, his wallet, and he's not accessing his bank account. Okay, does he have some secret stash of money that he's planning to live on? And I would say most likely no. These signs to me all point to some type of foul play. And after a couple of weeks, investigators started to suspect just that. But it seemed like no one was willing to talk, including the two men who were working on the car on April 11th. One of those witnesses, mechanic Bill Dragu, died in 2021. Former investigator Steve Whittington told the Maryville Forum, I always felt like Bill knew something about it, but he would never talk or anything.
Which is frustrating.
Frustrating to an investigator? Yeah, absolutely. When you get that kind of gut feeling that someone knows more than what they're sharing, but you can't get it out of them. Now, maybe you're wrong about that gut feeling. But if not, then you're stuck with the, we think this guy knows something, but we're never going to find out. And now you're definitely never going to find out. At least from him, right? Because he has since died.
Did you know that parents rank financial literacy as the #1 most difficult life skill to teach? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app for families. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Kids learn to earn, save, and spend wisely, and parents can rest easy knowing their kids are learning about money with guardrails in place. Try Greenlight risk-free today at greenlight.com/Wondery.
According to Whittington, in the first year after Branson disappeared, authorities dug up a septic tank in an area north of Skidmore and searched a spot in Quitman, an unincorporated area 6 miles south of Skidmore. They also searched multiple wells and followed up on all leads and rumors, which I think you have to do in a case like this. I don't know what else they have to go on.
It's like nothing's off limits at this point, right?
No, until it's ruled out, I would say no. Becky Kleino was told that several people took lie detector tests. Some passed and some didn't, but she wasn't given details. In 2002, authorities arrested a man named Jack Wayne Rogers, a former minister and Boy Scout leader, for illegally performing a surgery in a hotel room.
Okay.
That might be a first one in the history of you and I doing podcasts on true crime. Being arrested for illegally performing a surgery in a hotel room.
I mean, I've joked in the past with friends, like, I can do that for you.
Yeah.
You know, I have my knife. I can take care of it for you.
But also this guy's a former minister and Boy Scout leader. And it turned out that Rogers was performing a gender reassignment surgery. The victim experienced complications with bleeding, but survived. She said she didn't feel like a victim at first, but changed her mind when prosecutors informed her of Rogers' criminal history. Rogers was sentenced to 4 months in prison in 1992 on federal child pornography charges.
4 months seems kind of light.
It does. It does, but it also might explain why he was a former minister. At the same time, it's very scary that he was labeled as a Boy Scout leader.
Very scary.
While investigating Rogers, detectives found child pornography on his computer. He also made posts on message boards describing the torture and assault of multiple men, as well as acts of cannibalism.
Okay, he definitely should not be around any Boy Scouts, should not be a minister, probably shouldn't even be outside of the prison.
I mean, this guy is not someone you really want around the public, let alone your kids. In one post, he described picking up a blonde male hitchhiker and raping, torturing, and mutilating the man before burying his body in the Ozarks. The physical description of the man matched Branson Perry, so authorities considered Rogers a possible suspect in his disappearance.
Well, I think you kind of have to.
Yeah, I think you have to. Now, we know that some of this stuff was confirmed, right? The child pornography. But when you get into the area of posting things online, okay, could that just be fantasy? It's sick no matter what, but could it just be fantasy and not reality? And there is a chance of that.
Yeah, there is.
But police also found a turtle shell necklace among Rogers' belongings that looked just like one owned by Branson. Rogers maintained that he had never met Branson Perry, and the murder he wrote about was just a fantasy. Well, what's the guy going to say?
Yeah, he's not going to say, well, it actually happened. You got me.
Yeah, I was just trying to be as detailed as possible about what I really did. No, you're going to say, well, that didn't happen. That's just the fantasy I was writing about. In April 2004, Jack Rogers pleaded guilty to child pornography and obscenity charges and was sentenced to 30 years in prison.
And there's a sentence that's more acceptable.
Yes, I was going to say that's more like it. 4 months on federal child pornography charges? Pretty light.
Yes.
30 years? That's no joke. On September 10th, 2004, he pleaded guilty to first-degree assault and practicing medicine without a license. He was sentenced to 17 years for assault and 7 years for the unlicensed surgery. So he got 7 years for unlicensed surgery and 4 months in prison for child pornography back in 1992. It just shows you the difference, right?
And what the problems are.
In the times.
Yeah.
And they weren't that far apart, 12 years. But it did shock me that this guy was performing a gender reassignment surgery. We said he was a former minister and a Boy Scout leader. We never said the guy was a doctor, let alone a surgeon.
Talking about some trust. The person that said, you know what? I feel like maybe you can do this surgery. So I will go ahead and go to this hotel with you and allow you to proceed.
And I get it. Maybe this person wanted the surgery so badly and they couldn't find a reputable doctor who would perform it. But man, you were taking a big chance.
Absolutely.
A decade later in 2014, a youth minister in Toledo sought damages against the Kentucky-based Presbyterian Church, the First Presbyterian Church of Fulton, Missouri, the Missouri Union Presbyteria in Jefferson City, and Jack Rogers, who allegedly abused him. Reverend Chris Schondelmeyer said he was sexually abused at a youth conference in Maryland. In 2000, Rogers was a lay pastor at the time. The suit alleged that Presbyterian officials allowed Rogers to work as a chaperone despite his prior conviction for child pornography. Schondelmeyer told the Springfield News Leader he feared there may be other victims of Rogers.
How do you let that happen? How do you say, it's okay, go ahead and chaperone, just don't let none of that stuff you used to do come through again?
Yeah, I mean, it's shocking, right? If they knew about this and allowed that to happen, that is shocking. And if they didn't know about it, well, then they should have.
Yeah, they should have.
So it's shocking either way, right? Branson's mother, Becky, eventually came to believe Rogers was not involved in her son's disappearance, and the police have since focused on other suspects. And sadly, there wasn't really a lot behind why she came to believe he wasn't involved. Obviously, this was not a good guy.
No.
We just mentioned all of the things that he got in trouble for, things that he served time for.
But is it unlikely for us not to come across things like this when we look at unsolved cases?
No, happens every time, right? You're delving into what you believe is one crime. And police are looking at persons of interest, which obviously they have to do. But as you start researching those persons of interest, the things that come out about them are shocking.
They really are.
So even if this guy had nothing to do with the disappearance of Branson Perry, he had hurt a lot of people. And who knows how many people. You know, like this reverend who was abused said, he feared that there may be many more victims of Rogers. And I would say that's a well-founded fear.
I agree.
In 2009, an inmate told the police that Branson's remains could be found in equipment. Another individual was questioned in relation to this tip. The inmate led authorities to a site in equipment, but recanted his statement after a 2-day search. Law enforcement dug up a plot of land and found no remains. There were signs of disturbed earth, though, which indicated something was there before.
So when someone says that and then recants it, I mean, there's a reason why they said it. Either they're messing with you or something.
Or after they said it, they began to think about the possible repercussions, right? And thought, ooh, I maybe should not have said that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, whether it's someone's going to try to get to me here in prison or somebody's going to try to hurt my family on the outside. But interesting, they don't find anything, but they do find signs of disturbed earth. So was there something really there? But before they got there, someone dug it up and moved it to another location. I don't know. Former Notorious Sheriff Darren White told the Maryville Forum that the inmate most likely gave the false tip so he could get out of jail for a while.
Oh, they do that sometimes too, right?
You know, what's the harm? You're stuck in jail. You're stuck in prison. If you think you can get out for a van ride for the day?
Get some daylight.
And walk around in the woods for a little bit? Maybe. Now, it's a terrible thing for the family. It's also bad for police because they're expending resources on something that's, not going to come to fruition. But do these inmates really care?
No.
About that?
No.
And I think you're right. The answer is no. White said there were a lot of tips. And how do you determine what's credible and what's not credible? But they took everything pretty serious, and there were a lot of people that spent a lot of time looking in wells and ponds and just all kinds of places. In several counties, it never went anywhere. One time it was reported that he was put in a barrel and they threw him in the river. And there was a report that he was buried and then dug up and reburied multiple times. And then at one point, there was a report that he was buried under a bridge, and nothing ever came of that.
A lot of chasing the tail going on.
Which is, let's face it, a lot of times the bulk of what police work is, right? Especially in a case like this. What else can you do but follow tips and leads? Well, the majority of the tips and leads that the police get are not credible. So you're going to be disappointed often. But you can't not check them out, right?
No, you have to. Like my good friend Harry Bosch says, you got to get off your ass and knock on some doors.
You and that Bosch show, man, I tell you. You won't stop talking about it. Law enforcement focused on Branson's alleged connection to the drug scene in Skidmore and Quitman. Former investigator Steve Whittington said, "I'm sure this is all tied to drugs." According to the Charlie Project, Jenna Crawford told the police she and Branson used marijuana and methamphetamines. However, the Maryville Forum reports that Crawford said they used amphetamines.
Not really sure what the differences are.
Well, you and I aren't big drug guys, so our knowledge on drugs is pretty limited.
I'm guessing meth is probably worse than amphetamines.
The one with the meth in front of it?
Yes.
Well, we know how bad meth is. The one thing I will say is that, when it comes to this former investigator, him saying, "I'm sure this is all tied to drugs." Well, if you have a drug scene and you have at least a possible connection or a reported connection between the person who's gone missing and this drug scene, I think that's a somewhat safe assumption to at least float.
Yeah, it's not a big reach.
No, I don't think you can pin everything on it. Authorities also received tips that Branson was last seen on the day of his disappearance at a house a mile east of Quitman, Missouri, that was a well-known drug buying spot. This house was destroyed by fire just a few days later, but before Branson was reported missing.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, you have to weigh all of these things. First of all, if true, then maybe it does lend a little more credence to it being drug related.
Yeah.
Also, if the house was destroyed just a few days later, but before Branson was reported missing, can you then kind of jump into that scenario where something went down inside that house and it was burned to get rid of the evidence?
I wouldn't be surprised.
No, when you say it's a pretty easy assumption to make, well, again, I think you can make this one as well. It doesn't mean that's what happened. Could it have been an accident, the fire? Yeah, could be.
Good.
The timing is very suspicious, though.
Inconvenient.
You'd have to say that.
Yeah.
Former Nottoway County Sheriff Darren White told the Forum, "I can tell you that there were a lot of people that were involved in the drug community, involved in selling, and there were a whole bunch of them that they were all familiar with each other." Darren White was a deputy at the time of Branson's disappearance and responded to the call about the house fire. It had burned to the ground by the time police arrived. That makes me wonder if somebody maybe delayed their call for emergency help a little bit, almost to ensure that this fire did burn completely, or the house burned completely, before any first responders got the chance to try to put it out.
Yeah, sounds like it, doesn't it?
Well, I know that's what White believes, that this house held answers, because he told the forum the best theory is that the house is where he was actually murdered. That's the best theory, that he was murdered in that house, and that ultimately, of course, when the house was destroyed by fire, any possible evidence that might have been there would have been destroyed in the fire.
And he's right.
Yeah, I think he is right. It wouldn't be the first time that someone has used fire to destroy evidence. In 2019, former Sheriff Randy Strong confirmed to the St. Joseph News Press that Branson was last seen as a residence that burned down days later. In 2024, he told the forum that he was referring to a house in Quitman, but he didn't want to share more for fear of putting someone in danger due to the specificity of the information.
Interesting statement.
It is, and it makes me think that if he were to give more details, maybe those details could only have been provided by one or just a small handful of people.
And that would put them in jeopardy.
And so it wouldn't be that hard to figure out who was giving him the details. Yeah. Branson's aunt, Gail McMurray, said she was unsure about drugs playing a role in Branson's disappearance, but acknowledged Branson told me a lot about his personal life, but there were some things that he protected me from or would not talk to me about. And I don't think that's unusual at all. When you're talking about a young guy or a young girl for that matter, how many young people, 20 years old, are going to share everything about their personal life with their family?
They're not.
They're not, because they may not be doing everything that the family would want them to be doing, or they might be doing some things they know the family would not approve of.
Yeah, they're not. Hey, Uncle Billy, man, I smoked some good shit the other night.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
It just very rarely, right, is that going to happen, unless your Uncle Billy is also doing the same thing, and then maybe you trust him a little bit more. Strong also said in interviews with local news outlets that certain names popped up repeatedly during the investigation. He strongly believes there are people in the area with knowledge of what happened to Branson who have not come forward. And, let's face it, Gibbs, I kind of think that is true in most of these unsolved cases. Now, the longer they remain unsolved, the better the chance that some of those individuals die. But if Branson met with foul play, and let's just say there was a scenario where it happened inside of this house where there was some drugs, the house was then burned down, well, there's at least one person, if not more, who know exactly what went down that day. But again, there would be very little benefit for them to come forward and tell what they know, because essentially they would be implicating themselves in a murder, most likely.
Maybe that's something they've learned from the previous years in Skidmore, that, hey, we're best just to keep our mouths quiet. We don't talk about what we know and seen.
Strong told the outlet KQ2 that he believed officials were close to figuring out what happened, saying, I believe we know who we need to visit with based on previous investigations. I think he was with a group of individuals that he knew when he was murdered. And it's pretty simple as that. The sticking point on this, I believe, is that we're dealing with drug culture. They're not willing to give much information, and we don't know where the body is. So it seems to me that a lot of the law enforcement is focusing on this kind of drug angle, potentially this drug house being the scene of the murder. But again, they don't have a lot of information because people aren't talking. They haven't found his body. So you can have all the ideas in the world and you can have very strong feelings, about what you think happened.
Yeah.
But cases don't get solved on that alone. You need corroborating evidence. And I think that's what they're missing here.
I think that's going to be hard to get.
And as time goes on, it might be harder to get. Yeah. Sadly, both of Branson's parents have passed without finding out what happened to their son. His father died in 2004, and his mother died of brain cancer in 2011. She was heavily involved in the search efforts and keeping the case in the public eye until her diagnosis. She asked that people keep sharing Branson's case until he is found. One of her last wishes was having a headstone for Branson placed next to hers.
So this case just gets sadder.
Yeah, my thought is, it would be sad for anyone to lose a child. No doubt about it. But I think of some of these families who are missing a child. And in this case, both of his parents died without ever finding out what happened to him. That is sad.
Yeah.
Also, you can't put up a headstone. You don't have anywhere to go and grieve or talk to that person because you don't know that they're dead. You probably have that strong suspicion.
Right.
As much as you don't want to have it in the back of your mind, but that's also sad as well. That not knowing. After her death, her husband, Jim Kleino, said everybody in the family wanted her to find justice before she passed. When she was diagnosed with cancer, that was our fight too. So we had two fights going on at the same time. Branson's grandmother, Joanne Stinnett, also died in 2015. Brandon's cousin was Bobbie Jo Stinnett, another Skidmore woman who was tragically murdered a few years after he disappeared. 23-year-old Bobbie Jo Stinnett was murdered on December 16, 2004 by 36-year-old Lisa Montgomery. Bobbie Jo was 8 months pregnant.
Man.
Bobbie Jo and her husband ran a dog breeding business from their home in Skidmore. She met Lisa Montgomery through dog show events, and they had online interactions in a chat room and via email. In her emails, Lisa used the alias Darlene Fisher. She told Bobbie Jo she was pregnant, and they exchanged emails about their pregnancy. In December 2004, Bobbie Jo was selling a litter of puppies, and Lisa expressed interest in buying one. They agreed on a date to meet, but Bobbie Jo didn't know that Lisa had been faking her pregnancy and wanted to kidnap her unborn baby.
Sick.
Lisa Montgomery was born with permanent brain damage due to her mother's alcohol addiction. She was raised in a physically, emotionally, and sexually abusive environment. She was repeatedly raped by her stepfather and other men, and her mother once allowed workers to rape Lisa as payment for constructing a new living room. Lisa was also forced to live in an isolated room of the family home.
This is all so disturbing.
It is. Obviously, she had a horrible upbringing. At age 18, Lisa married her stepbrother to escape her abusive family. She had her first child in January 1987 and had 3 more children before she underwent a tubal ligation procedure in 1990. She later said she was forced into it by her husband and her mother. Lisa would claim to be pregnant several times after the procedure. Lisa and her first husband divorced in 1998, and she remarried a couple years later. By 2004, Lisa was involved in a custody battle with her ex-husband. Once again, she claimed she was pregnant. Her ex-husband knew this wasn't possible, so he and his new wife sent emails to Lisa telling her they planned to expose her lies and use them against her in court. Lisa said she would prove them wrong. So Lisa went to Bobbie Jo Stinnett's house under the guise of buying a puppy. She strangled Bobbie Jo to death and cut her unborn child out of her womb. The baby survived. Lisa was arrested in Kansas a day later and was charged with kidnapping resulting in death. The baby was returned to the father.
I'm just going back to Branson's family, dealing with his disappearance, dealing with this. I don't know how you do that.
No. And this is actually a very famous case. I thought that maybe we had covered it on TCAT, but I looked and we haven't. There's obviously much more to it than the small synopsis we gave here. So we could do it at some point, but just the thought that you could kill a woman and cut out her unborn baby.
Yeah.
Why? Because you don't want to be caught lying about you being pregnant?
I'll show my ex.
That is just unbelievable. But back to your point, the reason why we bring it up is just to show that the tragedy within this family. Lisa Montgomery was found guilty in federal court in 2007 after exhausting her appeals. She was executed by lethal injection on January 13, 2021. She was the first federal female inmate executed since 1953. And obviously, not as many women get the death penalty as men, but you would have to say that if a woman deserved it, she deserved it.
Yeah.
2021 also marked 20 years since Branson Perry disappeared. His friend Jenna, one of the last people to see him alive, spoke to KMBC and said Branson was a kind person who would do anything for anyone, adding, "The family and I think it needs to stay in the media to let everyone know we haven't given up. We're still looking for him and for answers." In 2022, former Sheriff Randy Strong announced that investigators have a suspect, but without a body, they don't have enough evidence to press charges.
That would be frustrating.
Yeah, it's an interesting statement, but also frustrating. On May 15, 2024, the Nottoway County Sheriff's Office announced they were conducting a search at a well in Quitman, Missouri, and bringing in the FBI for assistance. The search started the night before, after the sheriff's office received an unspecified tip. Local authorities felt the FBI had the best resources to investigate this lead. According to retired police officer Michael Kurtz, as of 2024, they're looking at this case now not as a missing person anymore. They're looking at it as a homicide. And I can understand that. I mean, with the amount of time that has gone by, the details that we talked about of, what Branson left behind, didn't take with him, it's hard not to think that he was the victim of a homicide.
Yeah, I think you have to shift your thoughts to that.
Unfortunately, the latest search ended a week later with no new evidence, but it did renew interest in Branson's case. Current Nottoway County Sheriff Austin Hand would not provide details on the tip that prompted the search, but he did reassure the public that the case is still open and they are following up on every lead. April 11, 2025 marked 24 years since Branson Perry disappeared. Investigators do not think he left of his own free will, especially considering the fact that he left all of his personal belongings at home and has not accessed his bank account. It seems that the house in Quitman is a strong lead, but if there was any forensic evidence, it would have been destroyed in a fire. This case may be solved by someone choosing to come forward with information. Branson is described as a white male with blonde hair and blue eyes, 5'9" and 155 pounds. If he is still alive, he would be 44 years old. If you have any information about his disappearance, you can contact the Nottoway County Sheriff's Office at 660-582-7451.
I think we agree, right? He was murdered.
Yeah, I mean, as we wrap this one up, I'm in the camp that this guy didn't voluntarily leave. None of the signs point to that, and all the signs kind of point away from that. To me, this idea of him being at a drug house or a house where drugs were sold, something went wrong or something went down. He was murdered inside the house, and the house was burned down to cover up that evidence. That's a very strong possibility.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense. Now, if they had come out and said, no, this guy never did drugs or, wasn't involved in anything like that, maybe it makes less sense. But, even his best friend Jenna confirmed that they did some drugs.
Yeah. Well, hopefully something shakes loose here in the near future.
Yeah. Again, as with many of the unsolved, they don't have a lot to go on, but could somebody come forward and say, hey, this is what happened.
Yeah.
Or I heard this is what happened. It's always a possibility. Maybe somebody's conscience, gets to them, or maybe somebody on their deathbed decides, you know what, I'm dying and I'm going to help solve this case. I don't know.
I can tell you where the body's at.
Yeah. But that's it for our episode on Branson Perry. We got some voicemails, Gibbs. You want to check those out?
Let's hear them.
Hey guys, this is Lynn, and I've been listening to you for years. And I gotta say, I'm on Team Mike. I mean, I like a guy that gets stuff done. Everyone's always picking on him. I feel bad for Mike. You keep at it, Mike.
He is a get-her-doner guy.
I am a guy that gets stuff done. It's not always important stuff. It's not always the stuff that makes the world go round, but I get stuff done.
But it's done.
It's done.
Yeah. Are you a procrastinator?
I am a procrastinator. Speaking of that, a couple of days ago, I woke up, came down to the studio, and on my laptop was a Post-it note from my wife with a little to-do list.
Shocker.
But
you got it done.
I got 3 of the 4 things done.
That's pretty good.
The other one I didn't do because it was raining and it was outside.
Well, you can't control the weather.
I can't.
No.
But I appreciate it,
Hi, my name is Robin. I'm calling from California. I've called, I think, before, but first, I love you guys. I've made it through all of the TCAT episodes, and now I'm going through Unsolved. I'm on episode 120, and you guys were talking about the movie Eddie and the Cruisers, and I just wanted to say I love that movie. It is highly underrated. I don't know how many people even know about it now, but you said you didn't like the second one, Eddie and the Cruisers 2, Eddie Lives, and you're wrong. It's awesome. The soundtrack is just incredible. Granted, I did see the second one before I saw the first one, so maybe that's why I love it so much. But anyway, just wanted to say hi to you both. Love the show. Keep your own time ticking. Have a good day.
All right, good call. I actually do think it's an underrated movie.
Yeah.
I don't remember the second one as much. I just remember not liking it as much. So maybe I need to go back and revisit it.
I just know you like singing that one song from the first one that they sing.
That I know the music is great.
Yeah.
For sure. And there's some good actors in there.
There are. We could actually rename it and call it Mike and the Cruisers.
We could. I don't know what purpose that would serve for anything.
No purpose.
Okay. You have great ideas, man. Love them. All right, buddy. That is it for another episode of True Crime All the Time Unsolved. So for Mike
and Gibby,
stay safe and keep your own time ticking.